بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب يسر وأعن يا كريم وافتح بالحق إنك الفتاح العليم. If the uncreated speech is the form in which Al-Haq Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has chosen to enshrine his final and definitive self-exposition in this transient fani dunya of space and time, then our theological discourse has always, and we find this from the very beginning of our study of Islam, focused on the miracle of speech itself, bayan. And although it is frequently the case that we ponder the mystery of the uniqueness, the khasa'is of the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when measured against the fragments of earlier bits of revelation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, "Allamahu al-bayan." He has taught him speech. And if you're to begin to get your head around Islam rather than just plodding along blindly following, if you're going to enjoy an understanding, which is what the ulama always urge us to, then we have to get our heads around the reason why the Transcendent One, subhanahu wa ta'ala, should have expressed his decisive, specific revelation in the form of speech. In Christianity, the decisive revelation is said to be manifested in the form of a body, a human being, the Word made flesh. In our context, however, we know that we have Kalamullah al-Qadim, the uncreated speech, and that is, as it were, the Word made book. Now, these parallels are slippery and treacherous and can't take us too far, but it's essential if we understand what's going on when we interpret the book, that we understand what it is that is going on when we communicate, what is speech. And indeed, this is one of the things that preoccupies the scholars at the beginning of the works, not just of Ilm al-Kalam, but the works of fiqh as well. Different types of speech. And logic, indeed, is, as it were, mantiq, the science of speech itself. It is discursive mathematics. There is the general revelation in nature, which is Allah's ayat, the ayat kawniyah, the signs, the infallible signposts pointing back to Him, which constitutes everything that exists in the world. And Iman can be defined as the ability to read those signs. The more of them we read, the more of those signposts we can work out, the stronger is our Iman, and the clearer will be our sense of the one in whom we have Iman. The second of these registers of revelation, according to the scholars, is the specific revelation. That is to say, the revelation which is made book, which in our case is Al-Quran al-Karim, the perfect quintessential distillation of speech itself. And in this month, the month of Ramadan, we have occasion to reflect on it abundantly. Not just the effect that it has on our hearts as we let it wash over us during Taraweeh and other occasions in this month when we engage with Allah's speech, but also the process of revelation itself, associated very often with the blessed night. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatin mubarakatin inna kunna munzilin. We sent it down in a blessed night. We are ever senders down. So this is the month in which we engage most intently with the quintessence of revelation itself. And if we're to get the most out of the month of Ramadan, we have to think about what is going on. So when we handle the Qur'an, when we hear it, when we interpret it, when we try to use our massively finite minds to encompass its meanings, we are at the very point where infinity meets finitude, where that which has no limit, no beginning, no end, meets ourselves, where we very emphatically do have beginnings and ends physically and in time. And we are the ones where that takes place. Specifically, the original point at which it took place was at the Ghar Hira, the cave of Hira, when the infinite speech came into this finite world. نَزَّلَهُ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ. He sent it down upon your heart. Nothing else could have carried it, but the heart of the Holy Prophet ﷺ carried it. And we know from those great hadiths at the beginning of Sahih al-Bukhari, Kitabu Bad'i al-Wahi, لَقَدْ رَأَيْتُهُ يَنْزِلُ عَلَيْهِ الْوَحِي في اليوم الشديد البرد وإن جبينه ليتفصد عرقا. Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha used to say, I saw the revelation descend on him on a very cold day and his forehead would be pouring forth sweat. What was that? Well, we can't imagine. What is it to have infinity burst in upon your heart or your soul? Particularly since this is defined as قولا ثقيلا, a heavy word. إنا سنلقي عليك قولا ثقيلا. Immense, what could be heavier than infinity itself? And he has said elsewhere that he لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. Had we sent this Qur'an down upon a mountain, you would see it smashed and split asunder with the fear of Allah. A mountain, the most solid thing in our experience, could not carry it. But it was carried by the heart of the chosen one, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And by extension, to the extent to which we reflect some tiny fragment of the Adamic perfection, which was his own, we also can carry it. This is one reason why we say Hamilul Qur'an, Hamalatul Qur'an, a carrier, a bearer of the Qur'an, to the extent that we are people of this book, to the extent that we have memorized it, we are carrying it, this weight is in our hands. Now, what this means is that the Qur'an is not just there to be interpreted, it is there to be experienced. And very often in our superficial age we tend not to understand that. After all, there's no other book which you experience. Other books are just full of information, a medical textbook or a novel which tells a story or whatever it might be, but the Qur'an is not that. It has a content, it has words, it has meanings, it has messages, it has wisdoms, but it is not just that, and it is not even primarily that. Because the worship is entirely valid if you recite it correctly, even if you don't understand a word of it. And that must mean, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to make proper worship available only to people who happen to know Arabic, that the fullness of our experience of His speech can come about even if we don't have even a translation, let alone an interpretation. Now, this is something which is recurrently broached in the text itself. And linked to the principle of hikmah, of wisdom. What is wisdom? Well, you could say wisdom is, to use the traditional kalam definition, putting everything in its due place. A wise judge puts everything in due place. It's to do with ihkam, that is to say, doing things excellently and according to due measure. When we read the Qur'an, we recognize that that is an appropriate strategy for interpretation. But we also recognize that it is to do with seeing that the text is not exhausted by its outward horizon and that it has depths. And one of the experiences that believers most frequently have is, as it were, falling into the text. A moment of khushu', a moment of sudden opening, and there seems to be a crack in the page and we fall into the book. And many of the ulama have reflected on the subtleties of the book, like Shah Waliullah Dehlavi, for instance, have commented on this. And it is indeed what one would expect. After all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make His final revelation simply a list of do's and don'ts. This is the non-Muslim perception of what the Qur'an is. It's just a kind of set of commandments. This is halal, this is haram, and follow these things and you'll get rewards in the next world. No, this is their stereotype, but the reality of the believer's experience is different. It's different because to the extent that we have some tiny inkling of the prophetic heart, which was the original Hamid, the original bearer of the Qur'an, we can experience and taste something of infinity. And this is our great experience of the transcendent, of the beyond. That the ulama say, none of you has faith until he finds in the Qur'an everything that he needs. And that doesn't just mean what the mind needs, it means what the heart needs as well. Many things that the heart has, particularly our emotional life, for instance, our sense of beauty, our sense of morality, that the mind may not be able fully to encompass. So when we speak of wisdom in connection with Allah's book, and it does describe itself as the Hakim, Al-Qur'an al-Hakim, we are talking about a book that exists on many levels. So, inna lil Qur'ani zahiran wa batinan wa haddan wa matla'a. Some of the ulama have written whole books. Dawud al-Qaysari, the first alim of the Ottoman Empire, the first mudarris of the madrasa at Iznik, wrote a whole book just on that particular athar. The Qur'an has an outward and an inward and a limit and a rising place. Mullah Finari also has a book just on that. And quite often when the ulama do a tafsir specifically on Surah Al-Fatiha, that's one of the things that they're looking at. So, but this of course imposes difficulties because human speech is finite, limited. We sometimes struggle to express ourselves even when we're talking about very worldly things. How could we express anything to do with the beyond, with the infinite, with the ghaib? Human speech cracks under the weight despite its extraordinary brilliance and versatility. It can't really carry those things. And the ulama generally, in our wise tradition, and ours is a way of sobriety and caution, not of extravagance, will say that the deeper things of deen are not to be put into words. Instead, we can speak in terms of ishara, pointings, indications, and there's a whole genre of hadiths. Hundreds of hadith works are called tafsir bil-ishara, tafsir by a kind of indication. Not ibara, which is the outward sense, the literal meaning, Fir'aun did this and Iblis did that, but the ishara, pointing. In other words, the text pointing into itself and away from the surface and inviting us into that extraordinary, mysterious world. It's important for us to remember this today because there are plenty of our adversaries who think the Qur'an is just commandments or bits of doctrine or reports of ancient peoples. And this was the response of the Quraysh, the unbelievers, when they first scoffed at the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said it's just asatirul awwalin, fables of bygone folk. But the difference between the mu'min and the kafir is that the mu'min has something in his heart which is lit up, which is illuminated when he hears these verses. And this is one reason why, in my experience, the greatest door to Islam for non-Muslims is actually Allah's book. But when people come into Islam, Allah's book has invariably played a very significant role in this. But not so much, in every case, the formal meanings, although they are the most important thing that we need to learn, but the inward wisdom, the sonorities, the syncopations, the sounds, the way in which the resonances work. It is an extraordinarily sophisticated oral experience, and that again leads on to the greatest depths. So when we speak of Luqman and we speak of wisdom, we need to bear this in mind, that the wise Muslim is the one whose heart as well as his mind is open to the book, who is transformed by carrying this enigmatic, paradoxical phenomenon in this world which is infinite. Sifatul mawsufi bil qidami, it partakes of the qidam, the uncreatedness of the divine, and this is one of the points that separates us from the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila said, no, the Qur'an is created. The Ahlul Sunnah said, no, it's uncreated. And by the act of doing that, they were saying that it represents the metaphysical, the ghaib, the beyond. It doesn't just talk about it, it represents it. And that's an essential part of everybody's aqeedah in the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So we have this, as it were, sort of ghaibi phenomenon amongst us. And when we interpret the Qur'an, we have to bear that in mind, otherwise we'll be disappointed, puzzled, outraged, frustrated, which is the inevitable fate of those who do not read it with this inward softness. And that's why in Surah Al-Baqarah, really the first thing that we are told to know is what the book is. Hudan lil muttaqeen, guidance for those who have taqwa. It's not a manual for how to live in creation so much as hudan, guidance for those who have taqwa. And taqwa is hahuna, as the Holy Prophet says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, it's in the heart. It's not a mental state, it's a disposition of the heart. It's an emotive, profound awareness of the need, given our fragility and the power of the divine, to fear our Creator. And this same issue comes up again, and there are resonances which you'll spot between the opening verses of Surah Luqman and the opening verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, which are important as we get into the core of the surah, which is about Luqman al-Hakim, the great figure of non-prophetic wisdom in Allah's book. So if we just look at how the text opens. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم تلك آيات الكتاب الحكيم. These are the signs of the wise book. So already hikmah is there being invoked. هدى ورحمة للمحسنين, a guidance and a mercy to the people of ihsan. In Al-Baqarah it's muttaqeen, here it's muhsinin. Two ways of looking at the same thing. To have taqwa is to do with a response to the divine on the basis of fear and an awareness of the divine jalal or majesty. Ihsan is to relate to the divine on the basis of an awareness of the divine jamal, beauty and generosity. But you're still the same human subject and you're still responding to the divine. So muttaqeen in Baqarah, muhsinin here, but it's just the jalal and the jamal, and Imam al-Qushayri has some interesting things to say about that. But you can see again the point is that it's a mercy and a guide to these people, not to everybody. Because elsewhere, in fact repeatedly in the Quran, Allah says يهدي به كثيرا, He guides many by it, ويضل به كثيرا. These are His two names, that He is the guide and the misguider. Al-Hadi is the guider, but also Al-Mudil, the one who leads astray. And He does that through His signs in creation, so we can run into the beauty of creation in order to celebrate it with our arwah and remember Allah, or we can run into creation and forget Allah because it is the nafs that is being activated. And it's the same with the book. Address the book, approach the book with the ruh, and these wonders will start to unveil themselves, and you will get the hudan and the rahmah. Rush into the book on the basis of your own ego and insecurities and hatred and whatever it might be, and you will find that it pushes you away. It repels you. And this again is axiomatic in the believer's appreciation of the book. And Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi compares the Quran to a shy bride. He says she's veiled and the bridegroom, their newlywed, wishes to approach her, wishes to unveil her. He wants to see really what the bargain has been, what she looks like. And the rude, importunate, rough lover is so offensive to her that she kind of hides and she draws the veil more closely about herself. But the one who is respectful with adab and a sense of wonderment, she sees that he is what he should be, and she unveils. And this is the Quran with human beings. Either the beauty is unveiled if you approach it with humility and with a living heart, or the Quran just kind of cringes from you if you approach it with arrogance. You can be religious and be arrogant as well. That's actually quite easy. A lot of our people do that. And then the Quran will shrink and shrivel and will be nothing more than a tool which you use in order to make your point or to achieve your goal. So this is how the surah begins, identifying wisdom with this process of the ihsan, which allows the heart to open and experience this hudan wa rahmah. So here you get, after this, these people who are the muflihun, the successful, and muflihun has a resonance with Arabic words indicating harvesting. So it's to do with fruitfulness. The heart bears fruit, and the fruit is something which secures a positive outcome in the afterlife. But then look what happens. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْتَرِي لَهْوَ الْحَدِيثِ لِيُضِلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. Amongst people there are those who buy idle tales without knowledge in order to mislead people from the path of Allah. وَيَتَّخِذَهَا هُزُوًا أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. This is exactly what happens with those polemical websites and people who are preaching and speaking against Islam. Because of the rage and the hatred in their hearts, the Quran is absolutely closed tight against them. And so what they do is that they deploy idle tales in order to illuminate, as they see it, verses from the Quran in order to lead people astray. And it's quite easy. Many of them find it quite easy to find things in the Quran, ahkam in the Quran, historical narratives in the Quran that seem to cause doubt amongst people. And this is exactly what this ayah is speaking of. And then you can see the diagnosis of his inward state. وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا وَلَّى مُسْتَكْبِرًا كَأَن لَّمْ يَسْمَعْهَا كَأَنَّ فِي أُذُنَيْهِ وَقْرًا فَبَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. And when our signs, when our ayat are recited to him, he turns away in pride, as if he hears them not, as if there were a deafness in his ears. So give him the news of a painful torment. That's exactly the state of the unbeliever in the grip of the divine name Al-Mudil, which is manifested through the book. The Furqan is the one that differentiates, not just telling us in terms of what it actually says, what is right and what is wrong, what is halal and what is haram, but which is differentiating the souls, which is discerning the spirits, showing what people are like. And you can see this if you have reasonably good translation of the Quran and you share it with non-Muslims. Those whose hearts are basically modest and they're curious and they're humble, they will be amazed by it. I've never known that not to happen. But those who have hearts that are full of fire and rage and anger, they find nothing in it. And this again is the mystery of the Quranic bride that may unveil herself and may not. As if there were a deafness in his ears. The staggering beauty, the symphonic power of the text just doesn't have any impact on them. And the Furqan again is shown to be Furqan. So this is how the text begins, by linking the principle of wisdom to the principle of our capacity to recognize God's speech. And then it moves on to the second part of the surah, which is the narrative of Luqman and his famous wasiyah, or his counsel to his son. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةَ أَنِ اشْكُرْ لِلَّهِ وَمَنْ يَشْكُرْ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ حَمِيدٌ. So in the light of what we've just spoken about, consider what is going on here. Truly we gave Luqman wisdom that you should thank Allah, and whoever is grateful only for his own self, and whoever is ungrateful, disbelieves, kafara, Allah is independent and Hamid, praiseworthy. Now, who was Luqman? Well, we don't have any solid external historical evidence. It's not really important. An ancient Arabian sage of an indeterminate period in history, who is used in the Quran as one of the figures for a wisdom that is real but is not prophetic, and is also in our tradition frequently linked with nature, and is similar, though not the same as, the other great nature sage, who is Al-Khidr. But this one is Luqman, and this is his famous wasiyah. Now, look at the things that he is talking about. He says, you begin not even with iman but with gratitude, but in fact they're the same thing. Faith is gratitude, the sense that the world is not just a kind of random set of events, but is a gift, and there's no gift without a giver. So if you have gratitude for the gifts, the ni'am that are in the world, you have shukrul mun'am, you have gratitude for the one who is conferring those blessings and those gifts, and that is what iman is. So in fact he is starting with tawheed, and he is starting with it. But if you speak in terms of, if you're talking to a child, talking about abstract qualities of the divine nature, arguments for the existence of God may be tricky, but if you say, look at this, aren't you grateful? I give you a sweet and you're grateful, but look at this universe, should you not be grateful? That's the way in which you speak to a child, and that's how he grabs his son's attention. And points out that it's just in our own interest to give thanks in this way. And if we're not grateful, then we're just being stupid, because all we can see in our blindness is a world that's a random set of cosmic events with no apparent point of beginning or end or meaning or moral life. That's the blindness of kufr. Verse 13, وَإِذْ قَالَ لُقْمَانُ لِابْنِهِ وَهُوَ يَعِظُهُ يَا بُنَيَّ لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّ الشِّرْكَ لَظُلْمٌ عَظِيمٌ. So where does he go next? When he says to his son, while يَعِظُهُ, giving him a maw'iza, or waking him up spiritually, O my little son, impartner none to Allah. لَا تُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّ الشِّرْكَ لَظُلْمٌ عَظِيمٌ. Impartnering others to Allah is a great sin, because after the shukr, after the gratitude, there has to be an awareness that the mun'am is one. The error of the pagan is to see the multiplicity of the world, the many things, and to assume that they come from many donors or many benefactors. So this has to come next. It's not just enough to have a general spiritual sense that the world has some kind of mystical point of origin. You have to define it as tawheed. There is one. So this is the next thing that he wishes to say. But then after tawheed, what does he wish to say? وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ وَهْنًا عَلَى وَهْنٍ وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ أَنِ اشْكُرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيْكَ إِلَيَّ الْمَصِيرُ. And we have recommended to man his parents. His mother bore him in weakness upon weakness, and his weaning was in 2 years. Thank me and your 2 parents. To me is the return. So here Allah is speaking directly. And this again is the next logical state. Because the child, having figured out that the world is amazing and it should be grateful, and then having realized that the object of this gratitude should be one, la tushrik billah, then has to move to the next stage, which is the moral life. How do we respond to this amazing world and this awareness that it has a source? By acting morally. And what's the first kind of morality that the child needs to grasp and can understand? How it relates to mother and father. The others are much less important in the early moral development of the infant. Gratitude to Allah, but gratitude to parents. So that has to be the next thing. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Allah has decreed that you worship none save Him and have ihsan, excellence towards parents. That's the next thing. Not because it's the only aspect of the moral life, but because it's the first context in which we think, I made my mummy sad. My daddy is angry with me. I shouldn't have taken this. That's where the moral life begins. And that's the next point that Hazrat Luqman is making. But again, look at what happens next. There's so much going on here. وَإِنْ جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَنْ تُشْرِكْ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا. But should they press you to impartner any with me, of which you have no knowledge, then do not obey them. So there's a hierarchy. The first thing, the important thing, the indispensable thing, the condition for salvation is tawheed. And then, really important, but still under it, is birr al-walidain, and more generally the moral life. The moral life cannot endanger tawheed. You cannot do something that endangers your belief in Allah simply for the sake of pleasing somebody or acting in a way that you might think is ethical. Obedience to parents has limits. And this is important in our aqeedah because it establishes the point that values only come from the divine. Values are not intrinsic in the nature of the world. We can work out by looking at things a certain intuitive awareness of right and wrong. But in terms of knowing right from wrong, that only comes from revelation. That only comes from the divine. So there's a hierarchy, a level. Morality cannot trump theology or belief. Theology is the source of morality. There is no other solid source of morality, of knowledge of right and wrong other than in the book. So that's why this comes next. And again, this is how you get a child to understand it, rather than talking about moral abstractions and natural law. A child's not going to understand that, but you say, even though it's really important to obey your mother and father, if they tell you not to worship Allah, then you should disobey them. And then what do we get? يا بني إنها إن تك مثقال حبة من خردل فتكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض يأتي بها الله إن الله لطيف خبير. This is the next thing he wants to say. He's talking to a child, but these are universals. We all need to see these as the most important things and the order in which they are going. The next thing he's talking about is, O my son, though it be but the weight of a grain of mustard seed, and though it be in a rock or in the heavens or in the earth, Allah will bring it forth, for Allah is subtle, aware. So that's talking about what? It's talking about Allah's knowledge, and it's talking about Allah's power. Al-ilm wal-qudra. Fundamental, essential attributes. And this is what the child has to understand next. First, tawheed, moral life, the attributes. Allah is not just some kind of vague, undifferentiated actor in the world. No, Allah has attributes, has sifat, and it's important to know this. So he's illustrating this to the child by saying, even if something's stuck in a stone, or if it's in a far galaxy, or whatever it might be, Allah knows it, and Allah can bring it forth, because He knows everything, Alim, and He's all-powerful, Qadir. And then, having been made aware of this, Tawheed, the moral life, the qualities, the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we get the explanation of how we are to respond. This amazing world which has been created has one source. We're to live a moral life. Allah has these qualities. What do we do about it? Well, now the child is told what to do. يا بني أقم الصلاة وأمر بالمعروف وانهى عن المنكر واصبر على ما أصابك إن ذلك من عزم الأمور. O my son, establish the prayer, enjoin good and forbid evil, and be patient with whatever may befall you, for that is among the difficult things. Min azmil umur. So the response to this awareness that the child now has is the prayer, and then not only acting morally but encouraging morality. And this is what Imam al-Ghazali calls a rukn al-a'zam fi din. The greatest pillar of religion is al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar. We are not kind of bystanders in this world. We are active moral agents. If somebody's being attacked on the tube station, you don't just watch, you actively get yourself involved. Otherwise, you are a participant in the crime. So the next thing the believer has to engage in is this rectifying the mess that other humans have made of Allah's creation, and that's the maqam of the Khalifa. That's what it is to be Khalifa, the one who upholds the order of Allah in His creation. And then you get adab issues, which are the next in this line. وَلَا تُصَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ. So this is a lesson in practical ethics. Do not turn your face in scorn towards people, nor walk arrogantly in the land. وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. Don't strut. Because Allah does not love those who are arrogant and boastful. وَاقْصِدْ فِي مَشْيِكَ وَاغْضُضْ مِنْ صَوْتِكَ إِنَّ أَنْكَرَ الْأَصْوَاتِ لَصَوْتُ الْحَمِيرِ. Walk modestly and subdue your voice. The most repulsive of all voices is the voice of the donkey. So that's the end, according to most of the Mufassirun, of this wasiyah that Luqman is giving to his son. And we can see that it just seems to be a list of nice things that a father might say to his son. But in fact, you've got a complete description of the religion of Islam here. From the belief to our response to that belief, to the need for a moral life, to the need for a world of worship, and then these adab, how we deal with other people, how we deal with Allah's earth. It's all there. It's all there in this wasiyah. And this is wisdom. A person of wisdom, the Hakim, looks at the world with his heart as well as with his mind, and sees the ihkam, the excellent creation of the Lord. And this is how he responds. But he won't get all of the details unless he has access to the specific revelation, which is the book of the Quran. Otherwise, we don't know how to respond. How do we worship? What are the boundaries of social interactions? What is the halal and the haram in our commercial lives? We won't really have a clue, and we'll just be wandering blindly. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His mercy has sent this revelation, the Quran, which is mubin, which makes everything clear, in order to complement and to operationalize the insights that we gain through looking at nature. Let's move on, Surah As-Sajdah, inshallah. What we have to do, because we're racing through a book that's the limitless ocean, Bahri Oman, is just to take a few things, characteristic things from each surah. Somebody will have to stop me when it's time to stop, because we started late, so I'm not keeping the clock. Surah As-Sajdah, this is said to be from the middle of the Meccan period, although very often if you actually look, for instance, at Waqidi or at Wahidi or at Suyuti, on these Asbab al-Nuzul, you'll find that often the ulama do struggle to date exactly surahs, particularly the surahs that seem to be composite, that is, like several of these that we're going to be looking at, they have material from the Meccan period and material from the Medinan period. But the general consensus on Surah As-Sajdah is that it comes from the 5th or the 6th year before the Hijrah. And you can see that, like many of the surahs in this sequence, it's the book reflecting on itself, just as the previous surah did. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif Lam Mim. Tanzilul Kitabi la rayba fihi min Rabbil Alameen. Again, it sounds a bit like the beginning of Baqarah, doesn't it, as the previous surah, Surah Luqman, did. Alif Lam Mim, the sending down of the book in which there is no doubt from the Lord of the worlds. So this is the book grandly stating itself, unveiling itself. And then you get, as with the previous surah, the objections, the scoffers. And if you're looking at the middle Meccan period, you can imagine that that was what was going on. Am yaqulun iftara, or are they saying he invented it, he concocted it? Bal huwa al-haqqu min rabbika litundhira qawman ma atahum min nadhirin min qablika la'allahum yahtadun. No, it is the truth from your Lord, that you might warn by it people to whom a warner had not come before you, that perhaps they will be guided. Some will say, well, there had been warners in that place before. Sayyidina Ibrahim, Sayyidina Ismail, the kind of ancestors of the Arabs. But this is specifically referring to the descendants of Adnan, that the ma undira aba'uhum, their forefathers were not warned, fahum ghafilun, which we get in Surah Yasin later on. Their fathers were not warned, so they're heedless. Refers not right back to the time of the prophets who were their ancestors, but as far as Adnan, who is some way back as an ancestor of the Holy Prophet, but subsequent to Ibrahim alayhi salam. But the point is, there are an ignorant people for whom ghafilun, and suddenly amongst these roughest people, these worshippers of lumps of stone and wood, these people who have no law but only tribal honor codes and vendetta, people who have no knowledge of life after death but only a kind of generalized sense that, well, there might be the possibility of revenge for one's murderers. People who are really at the opposite end of the religious spectrum from the monotheism of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. It is amongst those people that this book is being sent. That's an interesting circumstance. And this is one of the great miracles of Islam, we could say. If you look at the previous episode of prophetic revelation, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam was sent to monotheists. His mission was to the lost sheep of the children of Israel. They already knew most of what was important. They knew about Tawheed, they had the law, or a form of it, of the Sharia of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. He came to reinvigorate that. But Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is sent with an infinitely more challenging task. He is sent to people who've heard things about prophets and who've heard things about the possibility of a single God, but they don't take it seriously. They have their 360 deities around the Kaaba, and they have their honor codes, and if somebody injures somebody from your tribe, well, you go and injure somebody from their tribe, and there's no qadi, there's no sharia, there's no law. That's what you do. Vendetta. Apparently, having been doing this for hundreds, if not thousands of years, a deeply entrenched nomadic paganism. And we need to ask ourselves why it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should have sent the purest expression of monotheism and of the moral life to a people who really seem to be a catastrophe, with no moral life, a sense of honour and dignity and courage and hospitality. They had those things, but a moral life in terms of the softer things, compassion, tenderness, sensitivity, ithar, not really. Instead, what they valued was muruwa, a kind of machismo, a kind of the ego of the tribal chieftain. This was the Jahiliyyah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending His supreme revelation upon the heart of the finest of His prophets in this really dreadful place. And why is this? Well, one of the reasons that the ulama give, and it's really implicit in these surahs, is so that truth and falsehood might be made absolutely distinct. Because in the seerah, you have not just a monotheist arguing against other monotheists and it's a kind of family squabble. It's the whole spectrum of human religious possibilities, the one against the many, immorality against morality, no revelation against revelation, no life after death against life after death. It's a kind of cosmic drama. The two extremes of the human religious possibility are there. And it's also لِيُظْهِرَ عَظَمَةَ الرَّجُلِ, in order to demonstrate the greatness of the man. The Holy Prophet ﷺ, with at the outset basically no supporters apart from a few tribes, apart from a few slaves and women, people of no account. From that very unpromising beginning in this subcontinent that was Arabia, within 23 years he had turned them from belief in the many to belief in the one, from having no law into having a single law, from indifference to life after death into a kind of focus on life after death that was at the centre of their lives. the most extraordinary sudden revolution in the history of religion, and he does it, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, with really no support at the outset, and it's extraordinary, but it's a historical fact. And this is, some of my scholars used to say, my teacher used to say, that it's in order that the world could see the greatness of the man. Nobody else in history, secular or religious, has achieved 1/10 of that, or even 1/100th of that. It's extraordinary. It's quite extraordinary. But this is the divine wisdom. لِتُنذِرَ قَوْمًا مَا أَتَاهُم مِّن نَذِيرٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ, so that you might warn a people who have not been reached by a warner before you. And then we get, it's very beautiful in the Arabic and Surah Al-Sajda, we often hear it, and Fajr at Jumu'ah. It's lyrical statements to them, urging them, and you can kind of imagine the hearts of Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab kind of pondering this. This is the word that is being broadcast now in the city of Mecca, and it's staggering, giving them not some kind of highfalutin philosophical argument, proof for the existence of God, but rather an appeal to their hearts. Look, intuit, be humble. الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش ما لكم من دونه من ولي ولا شفيع أفلا تتذكرون. It is Allah who created the heavens and the earth and that which is between them in 6 days, then established himself on the throne. Apart from him you have neither protector or intercessor, will you not remember? And protector and intercessor, of course, the pagan Arabs did have some vague belief in Allah as a kind of sky god that presided in some not very authoritative way over the other gods, Al-Uzza, Manat, Hubal, the gods that the Arabs were really committed to, but they weren't particularly interested in the sky god, but they did have that belief, and they thought that these lower deities had some kind of power that was given to them in delegation from the Supreme. Some people might say, well, what's wrong with that? This is what's called henotheism in the history of religion. That is to say, you believe in a number of gods, but there's a supreme deity. What's wrong with that? Somebody might tell you. I go along to my friend and ask him to pray for me. Well, isn't that using a shafi'ah? Isn't that using an intercessor? And at the end of time, the Holy Prophet ﷺ is our shafi'ah, according to all of the sound hadiths. So what's wrong with this idea of having intermediaries? This shafi'ah and this wali? Well, the difference is that if you believe that intermediary has some kind of autonomous power in his own right, then that you've ruined your tawheed. That's the end. But if you believe that person's dua is acceptable in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that person is abd, then it's still tawheed to go to that person to ask for their prayers. And people used to go to the Holy Prophet to ask for his forgiveness. This is not something anybody's ever argued about. So going to somebody, asking for their prayers is fine. Going to Hubal, saying, Hubal, you're really cool, and we know that you've somehow been authorized by that God we don't think about very much to do stuff on the earth, that's shirk. And this is what is being denied here. Important to recognize this. And of course, what's the first thing that Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam says in Surah Maryam? His mother, she's taken a vow of silence, but she's confronting her critics in Jerusalem. She's not allowed to speak. فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ. It's a great moment. She points to the child. She can't speak. And they say, كَيْفَ نُكَلِّمُ مَنْ كَانَ فِي الْمَهْدِ صَبِيًّا. How can you talk to a babe in arms? And then Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam speaks, إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ آتَانِي الْكِتَابَ وَجَعَلَنِي نَبِيًّا وَجَعَلَنِي مُبَارَكًا أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُ. This amazing thing, his first khutbah, he's only a few hours old, but he's the one who does it, and on the basis of that, the whole sort of superstructure of the Greek church collapses completely, because their understanding was that he was intermediary, but also God at the same time. the first thing that he says in this world is, Inni Abdullah, I'm Allah's slave. To the extent that somebody is abd, in the state of ubudiyya, then they can be shafi', and they can ask for things from Allah on your behalf. But to the extent that they think that they are something in their own right, then they're disqualified from doing that. So that's what this is, and this is the argument against the Arabs. يدبر الأمر من السماء إلى الأرض ثم يعرج إليه في يوم كان مقداره ألف سنة مما تعدون. He directs the affair from heaven to earth, then it ascends to him in a day whose measure is 1,000 years of what you reckon. ذلك عالم الغيب وشهادة العزيز الرحيم. He is the knower of the unseen and the seen, the mighty, the compassionate. الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه وبدأ خلق الإنسان من طين. And then, after this first argument, look at the creation of the heavens and the earth. This is the creation clearly of a single deity. We get another one which is very characteristic in the Quran. وَبَدَأَ خَلْقَ الْإِنسَانِ مِنْ طِينٍ. He began the creation of man from clay. Is that not sufficient proof? What is the nature of the world left to its own devices? It's entropy, it's matter. But from that matter, there is the extraordinary miracle of the human form, the greater miracle of the human consciousness, and the still greater miracle of that consciousness having the ability to know right from wrong, halal and haram. A little bit unlikely that all of that happens just if the world is clay, is mud. That's not the nature of matter. It's not the nature of matter to produce more and more subtle things until you get the subtlest thing of all, which is the ruh, human consciousness. So this is a theological argument that's being rolled out here. وَبَدَأَ خَلْقَ الْإِنسَانِ مِنْ طِينٍ. Nobody can deny that, from clay. ثُمَّ جَعَلَ نَسْلَهُ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ مَاءٍ مَهِينٍ. Then made his offspring from a flow of mean water. ثُمَّ سَوَّاهُ وَنَفَخَ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِهِ وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ قَلِيلًا مَا تَشْكُرُونَ. And then he shaped him and breathed into him of his spirit and gave you hearing and eyesight and hearts. Little are you thankful. Another argument, really slamming them with it. Look at the miracle of yourselves. That's the other thing that you're certain about yourselves. You have a body, you have a mind, you have a consciousness, you have eyes, you have ears. Where is that likely to come from? Is that the kind of thing that just emerges randomly in a randomized universe? Don't think so. There's something too consistent and too brilliant about it. The human sight, a couple of squishy balls in the head, but still it can receive photons, light particles that come from a galaxy 1 million light years away. That's pretty impressive. You can see 1 million light years away, even though you're from clay. You can hear and you can discern beautiful sounds. You can hear the subtle gradations in people's voices. You can hear sarcasm. You can hear love. You can hear contempt. All of these extraordinary things, uniquely human. Nothing else in creation can get anywhere near that. And then all of that comes together in the human consciousness and produces the moral life and the desire to serve the creator of the heavens and the earth. That's pretty impressive. So is that just the consequence of nothing? قَلِيلًا مَا تَشْكُرُونَ. You don't give much thanks. Which, as we've seen before, means little faith have you. And then the other thing that the Quraysh were really exercised by is وَقَالُوا أَإِذَا ضَلَلْنَا فِي الْأَرْضِ أَإِنَّا لَفِي خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ بَلْ هُمْ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ كَافِرُونَ. And they say when we're lost in the earth, buried, dissolved, reduced to our constituent atoms, scattered in the sea, whatever it might be, shall we then be recreated? No, they disbelieve in the meeting with their Lord. In other words, the one that created you is perfectly capable of bringing you back again. Bala وهو الخلاق العليم. He is the creator. Say the angel of death, قل يتوفاكم ملك الموت الذي وكل بكم ثم إلى ربكم ترجعون. Say the angel of death who has been charged concerning you will seize you, then to your Lord you will be returned. And then we get a description of the Day of Judgment and the Akhirah, which was the thing that really weighed on the minds of the pagan Arabs who had no belief in it at all. There's so much in this surah. This is a beautiful description of the believers. تتجافى جنوبهم عن المضاجع يدعون ربهم خوفا وطمعا ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. There, they forsake their beds, calling their Lord out of fear and hope, and give of that which we have bestowed upon them. فلا تعلم نفس ما أخفي لهم من قرة أعين جزاء بما كانوا يعملون. No soul knows the delight which has been stored up for it or hidden for it as a reward for what they used to do. This is the implication of the divine justice. That's where this surah is now going. The Quraysh, hard-hearted people, don't believe much in Allah. They certainly don't believe in a resurrection and the reassembly of one's body after its dissolution in the earth or sea or the air. But then the argument here is because there is this one God, because the one God has created the world in the state of physical and moral order, because this one God is Hakim, is wise, characterized by all of the traits of perfection, that God is just. And therefore, everything that we do, and this hugely significant thing that's called morality in our lives, it will have an outcome and there will be a judgment. It is not possible that the God whose qualities have thus been established as being perfect, as being all-knowing, all-wise, all-just, should leave any injustice unrectified. And how is that to be? Sometimes it's rectified in this world, but this world is a place of rough justice at best. But in the Akhirah, لا تظلمون شيئا. In nothing will you have been wronged. And this is the aqeedah of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that there will be this perfect recompense. So that's the why this comes up here, that the extraordinary, no soul knows what is kept hidden for them of delights of the eyes as a reward for what they used to do. The third surah that I wanted to touch on in this session, inshallah, is Surah Al-Ahzab. Easier to date this one because the Ahzab is the Khandaq, the Battle of the Trench, and the Ahzab are the confederate tribes. Ahzab means parties or confederates, who were the Arabian tribes, Ghatafan and some clans of Ta'if, who conspired together in a kind of coalition of the willing to attack the Muslims in Medina with local traitors, as often happens, particularly people from the Jewish tribes of Banu Nadir and Banu Qurayza. So this is Surah Al-Ahzab, which is about, this is in a time of war, a time of crisis, because the kuffar certainly had it in their intention simply to destroy Medina and to obliterate, physically, ethnically cleanse Islam. These people were facing existential termination. So we get the divine injunction to the Holy Prophet. يا أيها النبي اتق الله ولا تطع الكافرين والمنافقين إن الله كان عليما حكيما. O Prophet, fear Allah and do not obey the unbelievers and the hypocrites. Truly Allah was ever knowing and wise. واتبع ما يوحى إليك من ربك إن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. And follow what has been revealed to you from your Lord. Truly Allah knows everything that you do. وتوكل على الله وكفى بالله وكيلا. Now these are counsels to the Holy Prophet, who is already ma'soom, but you can see here something of the tathbeet of his heart, because these are exactly the counsels that the believer should be listening to if in a state of crisis, if you are under attack, if you're in a military situation, mustering your forces, particularly if you are outnumbered, in order to defend yourself. remember, the first thing, ittaqillah, fear Allah. And then do not obey your enemies, which means don't surrender. Don't go along with their plans, because Allah is all-knowing and all-wise. Instead, just follow the revelation. وَاتَّبِعْ مَا يُوحَى إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ. Follow that which is revealed to you from your Lord. Truly Allah is all aware of what you do. وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. And that's the necessary response. It's a crisis situation. There will be some in Medina, particularly in the Munafiqeen camp, who say, well, this looks pretty impossible. There's tens of thousands of them and we're just one little oasis. Really difficult to defend because it's so big and people can attack from unexpected directions. So let's talk, let's make compromises, let's negotiate, let's settle our differences, which will inevitably involve compromises over Sharia and compromises over Tawheed as well, and will probably just give the Quraysh an opportunity to wipe us out at some later date. Instead, follow your Lord's commands. And how do we deal with that situation of real fear? Surrounded by these tens of thousands of wild tribesmen armed to the teeth. وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Rely on Allah and accept Him as your wakil. And this is the divine revelation that healed the hearts of the defenders of Medina. الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسُ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ. Those who said, these are the Munafiqeen, truly the people are ganging up on you, so fear them. But what happens? فَزَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. It increased them in Iman. And what did they say? قَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. They say, Allah is enough for us and excellent as a guardian, as a trustee. And this is the measure of faith. To the extent that you trust in Allah, you believe in Allah. Some of us will quite noisily profess belief in Allah and in Islam, but still when there's a crisis we start to get shaky, we start to get afraid. And that was the state of the Munafiqeen. They were Muslims outwardly, and on some level they did have a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not kafirs, but still it's pretty weak. And as a result, when they saw this Holocaust looming, they became afraid, and they said, let's negotiate, let's give up, let's whatever, let's run away. But the divine commandment was to show that you mean it when you say La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah means accepting that Allah alone is in charge of history, and you should trust Him. Don't trust the others, just trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is, of course, an important message for ourselves. We complain about Islamophobia and crises in 1,000 places in the Muslim world. Sometimes we become paranoid, which is the state of the Munafiqeen. Inna nasa qad jama'u lakum. People are ganging up on you. That's what the paranoid person says. The kuffar are all out to get us. This is not the way of the believer. The believer knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of everything. And it may well be that His decree in our case will be bitter, or it may be sweet, but we have to accept His decree. That doesn't mean we don't act. And we see the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his red turban riding around Medina, beautiful sight, making sure that the city was ready. No, we act, but without that fear in our hearts. We act, and this is the secret of being a believer, we act in a state of tawakkul, and that's the mystery of qadar. We know that the outcome is already known by Allah, so we're not afraid, because what can we do about it? But we still act. So that's always a hard thing for us to get our heads around, isn't it? We always worry about what is the meaning of morality if everything's going to happen anyway. Our actions, in a sense, just happen to us. What we really do is what our souls reach for, what they acquire of our actions. Our actions are just there, but what counts is the intention. And that's what the Holy Prophet ﷺ is looking for in his people. Are they reliant on Allah? The battle is in Allah's hands, it will take care of itself. But what is really important is whether the people are really consciously involved in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and relying on Him as their wakil. So this is kind of a superb reminder to ourselves of how we should be inwardly, and it's hard if we're threatened. Fear Allah, don't kind of sell out. The dominant culture wants us to have gay marriage, for instance, and we're kind of scared. Don't go there. They want us to do all kinds of things, make concessions, make compromises, be realistic, and some of us are kind of rattled, and they will start to make those concessions. But we are told here that that's not the way forward, that's not the solution, that's just a defeat. That's the sign of nifaq. And you can see that the people with weak iman in our community, a lot of community leaders, they're talking the talk and getting involved in a lot of modern liberal stuff that clearly is a violation of the ijma', of the sharia, in so many areas. And we should just be strong, confident, state what we believe, state our practices, because it's Allah who is our judge. It's not the kafirin and the munafiqeen who are our judges. And if they don't like it, that's just too bad. There's nothing in Revelation that promises you that the kafirin and the munafiqeen will love you. It might sometimes, but it's not guaranteed. Don't worry about Islamophobia. The Sahaba faced a lot of Islamophobia. They didn't make concessions as a result. They were steadfast, compassionate. We're not always compassionate. Wise. We're not always wise. But they didn't make concessions, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them this incredible victory and this extraordinary transformation of the dominant culture of their time, the pagan Arabs, into the greatest community of Tawheed that the world has ever seen. So these are important lessons for us. Fear Allah, obey not the disbelievers and the hypocrites. Follow what is revealed to you from your Lord. Allah is aware of what you do. And don't start to fiddle with Allah's commandments, because He's watching. وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. Put your trust in Allah. He is sufficient as guardian. Those are the three steps really that we need for our current situation. And so much of this angry, shouting, panicky mood amongst Muslims is an indication of a weakness in Iman. We think that maybe Allah is not in control of history any longer. He's kind of let it slip, and that something else is in command. That's not the case. Allah, it's not in His nature to let go. Everything is in His hands. And the believer has to acknowledge that and see everything that happens, even the tough things, as manifestations of His power and His nature, and simply to do what we're commanded to do. وَاتَّبِعْ مَا يُوحَى إِلَيْكَ. Follow what is revealed to you. That is the situation that you have. And if you're afraid in yourself, rely on Allah, and then He will give you this sakina, this stillness. And there's so much in Surah Al-Ahzab. It's a really tremendous surah. It's a shame that we can't spend a whole day on it. This is a beautiful ayah. Sometimes you hear people saying there's too much stuff about love of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in our communities, and too much poetry, and we're kind of fixated on it. That's a big mistake, because Allah Himself is talking about the greatness of His Messenger and how he was with the Sahaba and how the Sahaba were with him. So what happens next? النبي أولى بالمؤمنين من أنفسهم وأزواجه أمهاتهم وأولو الأرحام بعضهم أولى ببعض في كتاب الله من المؤمنين والمهاجرين إلا أن تفعلوا إلى أوليائكم معروفا كان ذلك في الكتاب مسطورا. The Prophet is nearer to the believers than themselves, and his wives are their mothers, and bloodkin are nearer to one another in the book of Allah than other believers and the emigrants, except that you should do kindness to your friends. This is written in the book. Well, the basic context of this verse is, again from this middle Medinan period, that you'll recall that when the Muhajirin reached Medina, they left basically wealth and houses and everything behind. They were asylum seekers, refugees. And the Holy Prophet decreed that the Ansar should give half of their wealth, their farms, their homes to these refugees, to these asylum seekers. This is the mu'akhat. And to the extent they were so integrated into their families and their tribal structure that they could inherit. The inheritance laws included somebody who was your guest, effectively a family member now, who'd come from Makkah. If you died, that individual could inherit. But this ayah came in order to indicate that that was at an end. So, وَأُولُو الْأَرْحَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَى بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. Bloodkin, relatives, are nearer to one another in the book of Allah than other believers and the muhajirin. So that this is specifically indicating that that is at an end, and now the specific fara'id, inheritance in the religion, is to be determined on the basis of family rather than a muhajir guest. So, but the real extraordinary thing about this ayah is this idea of, really, it's like saying that the Holy Prophet is our father, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet is nearer to the believers than themselves, and his wives are their mothers. If they're our mothers, then he is, if you like, father, and that indicates one of the reasons why love is an appropriate relationship to the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nearer to the believers than their own selves. If we consider, if we ever do, what we are internally and our sense of self and our perception of the world and how important we are to ourselves. I want to sit here, I want to talk to that person, I want to go to this place, and it's all I. All of life is about decisions that I take. What if there's somebody who is even more important to you than that I? Can we imagine that? Somebody who is more important than number one, or a number one who makes us number two. What could that be like? That's only possible if you really love somebody, really, really passionately love somebody. You can kind of glimpse that if you have a really good and close and loving relationship with a friend or a spouse in this world, and you put that person first. But it's not full time, and it's never perfect. But the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the Muhajirin and the Ansar, had this extraordinarily passionate love for the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the self that they cared about, and their own selves they would sacrifice without hesitation for him. A different kind of consciousness. What would it be if we experienced ourselves always as number two, not as number one? That would be something extraordinary. But that's not just what they were called to be, that's what we are called to be as well. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the example of everything that is true and pure in belief and in practice and in adab and in akhlaq, the model of Khalifatullah, Allah's representative on this earth. That ideal should be the number one, and the number two, which is ourselves, should be constantly trying to measure up. Of course we'll never make it, but at least if we have these two selves, the prophetic self as an ideal within ourselves, and our own selves in all of our muddy confusion, our stupid desires, our absent-mindedness, our egotism, our false hopes, the mess that we are also within ourselves, then we have the possibility of this muddy self looking into the mirror and then acknowledging what the prophetic mirror could be like and seeing the light that shines in the heart of the prophetic mirror. It's only by being close to somebody who is absolutely better than ourselves that we can really recognize what a mess we ourselves are. So if the Holy Prophet is for every single believer the number one, and we are just number two, or if we're realistic, maybe there's thousands of people who respect much more than we respect ourselves, that's when faith starts to dawn, and instead of worshipping ourselves, we're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I guess I've run out of time. Is there anything else in Ahzab that I wanted to cover? Oh yes, there is. It's a long surah, isn't it? Yeah, just the last thing, verse 72. إنا عرضنا الأمانة على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملها الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا. The ulama have said a lot about this ayah, and it's subtle. Truly, we offered the trust to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they refused to bear it and were afraid of it, and man assumed it. Man is most unjust and ignorant. One of the meanings of this is the knowledge of good and evil. Only man has that. Another is the related issue of taklif, that is to say, moral accountability. Nothing else in the world can go to heaven or hell, only human beings. And this is scary, it's frightening. Another is that it relates to the day of Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala summoned all of our souls before His presence and said, Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And we all said, Bala shahidna, yes, we bear witness. So it's that amana, that trust, that mithaq that is within our souls, and that only human beings can have that memory, that recollection deep within ourselves of that extraordinary time at the beginning of everything. Nothing else in the world has an awareness in that conscious sense of having been in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, it's frightening, and we are ignorant and we are fools, because that is what we are and where we were, and that is our natural place of abode, to be in the divine presence. That's where we are from. And we have the amana, the responsibility to remember that. That's what dhikr means. It means remembering our source. But unfortunately, zalom, jahul, we get it wrong ethically, and we are ignorant, we are forgetful, and most of the time we don't conceive of ourselves as these extraordinary entities, these khalaiq, that were in the presence of the divine. But instead we've forgotten, and we follow the shadows, and we neglect the light, and that is tragically the condition of human beings. More could be said particularly about this verse of amana, which has been particularly important in our civilization, but inshallah we come to the end of this session. So sadaqallahu al-azim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.